Imagine this: a young girl from Ohio, sneaking cigarettes and whiskey at 15, dreaming not of fairy tales or fancy dresses, but of the ultimate power seat in America, the White House. Not as a visitor, mind you, but as its queen bee. Sounds like a plot from a modern drama series, right? But this is the real-life story of Helen Herron Taft, the firecracker First Lady, who turned the role upside down from 1909 to 1913. She wasn't just William Howard Taft's wife. She was his secret weapon, his strategist, and the driving force that propelled him to the presidency. Buckle up, because we're about to unpack her extraordinary journey. From a rebellious teen in Cincinnati to a trailblazing influencer in Washington. And trust me, by the end, you'll see why she's the unsung architect of one of America's most intriguing political dynasties. What if I told you her ambition started with a White House sleepover at 17? Let's dive in and find out how she made that dream her reality. Born on June 2, 1861 in Cincinnati, Ohio, Helen Louise Herron, affectionately known as Nellie, entered a world buzzing with politics. Picture a bustling household with 11 siblings, where dinner table talk revolved around laws, elections, and power plays. Her father, John Williamson Herron, was a sharp lawyer who'd rubbed shoulders with future presidents like Benjamin Harrison and Rutherford B. Hayes. He wasn't just acquaintances with them. He was Harrison's college buddy and Hayes's law partner. Her mother, Harriet Collins Herron, came from a lineage of U.S. senators. So politics wasn't just in the air, it was in the blood. As a Gemini born in the year of the rooster, Nellie embodied that curious, bold energy from the get-go. But growing up in such a crowded, high-expectation family wasn't all glamour. With 8 siblings surviving to adulthood, the chaos bred in her a sense of self-doubt and a desire for independence. She kept her distance, forging her own path early on. As a kid, Nellie was no ordinary girl next door. She had a knack for music, tickling the ivories on the piano like a pro, but her real passion? Politics. She'd sneak into her dad's law office, devouring legal tomes that most girls her age wouldn't touch. And get this, she was a rebel with a cause. By 15, she was secretly puffing on cigarettes, sipping whiskey, and even gambling, all while society demanded ladies be prim and proper. It was her way of bucking against the gilded cage of upper-class expectations for women. Education became her escape hatch. She attended the prestigious Miss Norse's School for Girls in Cincinnati, soaking up languages and subjects that broadened her horizons. Later, she hit up Miami University and even dabbled at the University of Cincinnati. But the pivotal moment, in 1877, at just 16, she tagged along with her parents to visit President Hayes at the White House. They stayed for weeks, and young Nellie was hooked. Wandering those grand halls, mingling with the elite, she whispered to herself, "One day I'll be back, not as a guest, but as the First Lady." Can you imagine the spark that lit in her? That trip wasn't just a vacation, it was the blueprint for her life's mission. Fast forward to her early adulthood, and Nellie's itching to break free from Ohio's stifling confines. She saw the Midwest as a dead end for her ambitions. No offense to Ohioans, but she craved bigger stages. Marriage? That wasn't her endgame. She viewed it as just one option in a woman's toolkit. She worked in her dad's law firm, handling clerical stuff, but social debuts? She rolled her eyes at those frivolous obligations. Complaining about the slim career picks for women, she dipped her toes into teaching French at a private school in Walnut Hills for 2 years starting in 1881. Spoiler, she hated it. Deep down, she dreamed of writing or performing music professionally, but those paths fizzled out. Enter William Howard Taft, the man who'd become her partner in crime and I mean that literally in the political sense. They first crossed paths at a sledding party in 1880, though their families had mingled before. Sparks flew when they acted together in a community theater group. By 1884, Nellie was hosting intellectual salons every Sunday afternoon, debating hot topics with Taft and his brother Horace. Taft was smitten, wooing her with dances, letters, and flowers. But Nellie's insecurities made her hesitant. She dodged commitment, fearing he didn't truly value her brains or that she'd be sidelined. He proposed multiple times. Talk about persistence. Finally, in June 1885, she said yes, but on her terms. Keep the engagement hush-hush. Their courtship wasn't your typical romance. It was a meeting of minds, with Nellie already plotting how this union could fuel her White House dreams. On June 19, 1886, they tied the knot in a ceremony that screamed practicality. Honeymoon? A 3-month European jaunt hitting England, Germany, and Italy, with Nellie micromanaging the budget to $5 a day. No lavish splurges here. This was a power couple in training. Their marriage was a true partnership, emotional, intellectual, and yes, political. Taft valued her opinions fiercely, calling her his best critic. She'd call him out when he was wrong, and he'd listen. He even dubbed her the family's politician, expecting her to outshine him in the game. From day one, she handled the finances and nudged him toward executive roles over his preferred judicial path. When he snagged a 5-year judgeship in Cincinnati in 1888, she fretted it might stall his ascent. But her networking paid off. Leveraging her family's ties to President Harrison, she helped land him the U.S. Solicitor General gig in 1890. Moving to Washington, D.C., was Nellie's ticket out of Cincinnati's boredom. She coached him on speeches, became a social butterfly, and haunted congressional sessions to build alliances. By 1892, they were back in Ohio for his federal judgeship, which she saw as a setback. Meanwhile, she juggled raising their kids, Robert in 1889, Helen in 1891, and Charles in 1897. But she didn't stop there. She co-founded a hospital and led the Cincinnati Orchestra Association as president. Still, she griped about the city's dullness. Then came the game changer. In 1900, President McKinley tapped Taft to head a commission in the Philippines, post-Spanish-American War. Nellie pushed him to take it, seeing it as a stepping stone to the presidency. Adventure called, and she answered with gusto. Life in the Philippines was Nellie's playground. She learned the language, donned local attire, and hosted Filipinos at events to bridge cultural gaps. Her anti-racism efforts helped thaw tensions, ending discriminatory practices. She rode horses across the islands, tagging along on Taft's trips to China, Japan, and Hong Kong. As the governor's wife, after Taft's promotion on July 4, 1901, she turned Malacañang Palace into a hub of diplomacy. Her nutrition program delivered milk to Filipino kids, and she threw lavish dinners to foster goodwill. This era loomed large in her memoirs, bigger than her White House days. But it wasn't all smooth. A grueling return home in December 1901 left her exhausted. Taft needed surgery, and her parents suffered strokes. Her mom didn't make it. In 1902, they jetted to Italy for a papal audience with Leo XIII. By 1904, she convinced Taft to snag Secretary of War under Theodore Roosevelt, pulling them back to D.C. As cabinet wife, Nellie felt demoted from her Philippine royalty. She rivaled First Lady Edith Roosevelt, but played nice to boost Taft's ties with Teddy. Global travels sharpened her political acumen. When Roosevelt eyed Taft for the Supreme Court in 1906, Nellie stormed in for a 30-minute showdown, nixing it to keep presidential dreams alive. She won Roosevelt's trust even more than her husband as 1908's election loomed. They crisscrossed the country on speaking tours. Stressful, sure, But Nellie advised every step, monitoring news and strategizing how his war secretary moves swayed voters. Caught playing cards on a Sunday? Scandalous, but it humanized them. William Howard Taft's victory in the 1908 presidential election represented a profound personal achievement for Helen Herron Taft, often referred to as Nellie, as she had meticulously orchestrated and guided his political trajectory toward this pinnacle, leveraging her strategic insights and family connections to propel him from judicial roles into the executive branch despite his own preferences for the judiciary. Her enthusiasm for the inauguration was palpable. She personally oversaw intricate preparations, including sending her inaugural gown to the Philippines for elaborate embroidery by skilled artisans, a nod to her formative experiences there that blended cultural appreciation with her flair for distinctive presentation. In a groundbreaking move that symbolized her assertive role and subtly aligned with emerging women's rights sentiments, Nellie became the first First Lady to accompany her husband in the official ride from the Capitol to the White House, immediately following his swearing-in ceremony on March 4th, 1909, breaking long-standing traditions where presidents rode alone or with other dignitaries, an act that drew both admiration and commentary from observers as a subtle endorsement of greater visibility for women in public life. Upon entering the White House, she embarked on a comprehensive revamp to imprint her vision, swiftly removing the mounted animal heads left by Theodore Roosevelt that she found distasteful and replacing them with elegant Eastern-inspired decorations drawn from her travels in Asia, incorporating vibrant floral arrangements sourced directly from the White House greenhouses to infuse the spaces with natural beauty and a sense of renewal. Among her practical innovations, she introduced the first double bed in the presidential bedroom for enhanced comfort, installed a secure safe for valuables, and added a specialized silver polisher to maintain the household's heirlooms in pristine condition. Further demonstrating her commitment to efficiency and inclusivity, she restructured the staff by replacing traditional white male ushers with uniformed African-American footmen, a progressive decision that earned praise from contemporary media like the New York Times for promoting diversity in federal employment, while also swapping the housekeeper for a more formal steward to oversee operations with greater precision. Her obsessive attention to cleanliness and order not only garnered positive press coverage, but also set a new standard for White House management, reflecting her belief in the residence as a symbol of national dignity and her own managerial prowess. However, this energetic start was abruptly interrupted by tragedy when, in May 1909, just 2 months into the term, Nellie suffered a severe stroke that paralyzed her right side, impaired her mobility, and caused aphasia, robbing her of clear speech and necessitating a prolonged retreat from public view for recovery. The media downplayed the incident as a nervous breakdown to shield her privacy in line with era norms. But in reality, she dedicated over a year to intensive therapy, painstakingly relearning how to articulate words and gradually regaining partial function, though she never fully recovered her pre-stroke vitality or confidence in public speaking, which limited her engagements and left a lasting speech impediment that made her self-conscious in social settings. In her hosting duties, Nellie elevated the White House's social functions to levels of regal sophistication, drawing heavily from the grandeur she had experienced during her time in the Philippines, where she had organized elaborate events to foster diplomatic ties. She systematically revamped long-standing traditions by selecting more strategic and aesthetically pleasing venues for gatherings, introducing formal dancing at official receptions to add liveliness and modernity, and hosting expansive garden parties on the White House lawns that featured theatrical performances and live music, transforming the grounds into vibrant cultural hubs that engaged diverse audiences. Following her stroke, her sisters, Jenny Anderson, Eleanor Moore, and Maria Herron, along with her daughter Helen, stepped in to assist with these responsibilities, ensuring continuity while Nellie directed from behind the scenes on the second floor. By 1910, she had sufficiently recovered to resume some duties, and by 1911 she was operating at full capacity, exemplifying resilience that inspired those around her. A highlight of her social calendar was the extravagant silver wedding anniversary celebration on June 19, 1911, which drew nearly 5,000 invited guests, including politicians, diplomats, and personal friends, to the White House for an opulent evening of festivities, while an additional 15,000 spectators gathered outside to witness the spectacle, marking one of the largest events in White House history and underscoring her skill in blending personal milestones with public diplomacy. Her independence shone through in her refusal to participate in routine luncheons with cabinet wives, preferring instead to observe presidential meetings discreetly and manage the household with executive-like authority, akin to a CEO overseeing a complex operation. Financially astute, she slashed the family's annual expenditures from the president's $75,000 salary down to $50,000 by implementing cost-saving measures, ultimately amassing a savings of $100,000 by the end of the term, a remarkable feat that demonstrated her prudent budgeting skills honed from earlier years. Among her resourceful tactics were purchasing food in bulk for economies of scale, and even keeping a cow named Pauline Wayne on the White House grounds to provide fresh milk and butter, though this unconventional choice attracted criticism from urban sensibilities and animal rights advocates of the time. She established a routine of hosting receptions in the Red Room 3 afternoons per week, fostering regular interactions with Washington's elite, and pioneered the tradition of post-state dinner musical entertainment, which featured performances by renowned artists and became an enduring White House custom that enriched diplomatic evenings. Another of her visionary initiatives was the creation of free summer concerts at West Potomac Park, performed by the United States Marine Band, which she conceived as accessible public entertainment to democratize cultural experiences, transforming the park into a promenade reminiscent of Manila's Lunita Park that she had admired during her Philippine tenure. She personally selected the site for a bandstand on April 1st, 1909, and organized weekly shows that included a mix of international and American compositions, even inviting the Filipino Constabulary Band to perform in a gesture toward racial equality and cultural exchange. Perhaps her most enduring project was orchestrating the planting of Japanese cherry trees around the tidal basin and throughout Washington, D.C., after accepting a generous gift of 3,000 trees from Tokyo's mayor in 1910 as a symbol of U.S.-Japan friendship. On March 27, 1912, she and the wife of the Japanese ambassador, Viscountess Chinda, ceremonially planted the first 2 trees, an event that not only beautified the capital, but also established the National Cherry Blossom Festival as a major tourist attraction that draws millions annually, reflecting her foresight in creating lasting public legacies inspired by her global experiences. Regarding prohibition, Nellie defiantly opposed the growing temperance movement, insisting on serving alcoholic beverages at White House functions, despite her husband's more conservative inclinations and vocal protests from groups like the Women's Christian Temperance Union. In interviews with publications such as Ladies' Home Journal, she publicly declared her intention to offer champagne punch and other drinks, earning editorial support for her stance on personal freedoms, while weathering criticism that highlighted the era's cultural divides. She frequently inspected the White House kitchen to ensure culinary excellence, particularly perfecting her signature turtle soup recipe, which became a staple at formal dinners and showcased her hands-on approach to hospitality. As a witness to technological progress, she oversaw the transition from horse-drawn carriages to the first fleet of presidential automobiles, negotiating discounts with manufacturers like White Steam Car and Pierce Arrow in exchange for promotional rights, a savvy arrangement that modernized transportation while subtly advancing commercial interests. Media savvy in an age when first ladies were often shielded from the press, Nellie engaged openly with reporters, granting interviews and fostering relationships, especially with female journalists, to bolster their professional opportunities in a male-dominated field. In 1912, she made a historic donation of her inauguration gown to the Smithsonian Institution, inaugurating the renowned collection of First Ladies' dresses that remains one of the museum's most popular exhibits, preserving fashion as a lens into presidential history. Politically, Nellie immersed herself deeply in the administration's affairs, offering opinions on a wide array of issues, and occasionally clashing publicly with her husband when their views diverged, which underscored her intellectual independence and challenged traditional notions of spousal deference. She meticulously managed his public image, coordinated his schedule to maximize effectiveness, and even monitored his narcolepsy episodes to prevent disruptions during key engagements, ensuring he appeared composed and capable. Her influence extended to personnel decisions, where she advocated for greater roles for women in government positions, vetoed the reappointment of Ambassador Henry White due to a long-standing personal grudge stemming from diplomatic slights, and blocked Nicholas Longworth's nomination as a diplomat because of his marriage to Alice Roosevelt, whom she disliked intensely, a decision that exacerbated tensions and contributed to the widening rift between the Tafts and Theodore Roosevelt, ultimately fracturing Republican unity. Although she did not identify as a feminist, Nellie supported women's suffrage through actions like reviewing a suffragist parade from the White House the day before leaving office and convincing her husband to appoint women to federal posts. In 1912, she attended a House Rules Committee hearing on police brutality against female protesters, drawing national attention to the issue and amplifying calls for reform. She also championed the rights of African Americans and other disadvantaged groups, arguing that societal barriers stemmed from lack of opportunities rather than inherent deficiencies, and actively promoted safer working conditions by inspecting federal workplaces, collaborating with the National Civic Federation, and influencing Executive Order 1498 on March 17, 1912, which mandated sanitary and safe standards in government buildings, the first federal legislation of its kind. The stroke undoubtedly curtailed her deeper involvement, a regret she later expressed, but William Howard Taft publicly credited her with sharing in his successes, viewing her as an equal partner whose counsel was indispensable. Nellie unapologetically claimed her influence, which invited ire from political opponents who accused her of overreach, yet it positioned her as a pioneer in expanding the First Lady's advisory role. Among her trailblazing feats, she was the first Lady to attend Supreme Court oral arguments, notably the 1911 Standard Oil antitrust case that dismantled the monopoly, and the first woman to sit in the lawyers' section during justice swear-in ceremonies, asserting women's presence in judicial spheres. In a bold display during the 1912 election cycle, she attended both the Republican National Convention, where her husband secured renomination amid Theodore Roosevelt's challenge, and the Democratic National Convention in Baltimore, the first incumbent First Lady to do so, positioning herself in the front row to deter speakers from harshly criticizing her husband as Woodrow Wilson was nominated. The devastating loss in the 1912 election to Woodrow Wilson, compounded by Roosevelt's third-party bid that split the Republican vote, deeply affected Nellie, who had invested her ambitions in her husband's presidency and loathed relinquishing the White House's power and prestige, viewing the defeat as a personal setback despite her partial satisfaction in seeing Roosevelt thwarted. In the post-presidency period, the couple relocated to New Haven, Connecticut, where William assumed a professorship at Yale Law School, providing a quieter academic life. Nellie experienced isolation with her children, pursuing their own paths, son Robert entering politics, daughter Helen advancing in academia to become dean at Bryn Mawr, and son Charles in business, and her husband frequently traveling for lectures. Yet she found solace in escaping the relentless public scrutiny that had defined her Washington years. In 1914, she broke new ground by publishing Recollections of Full Years, co-authored with her daughter Helen and journalist Eleanor Egan, becoming the first former First Lady to release memoirs during her lifetime, a candid account that detailed her Philippine adventures, White House experiences, and political insights, offering historians a rare first-hand perspective on early 20th century diplomacy and domestic life. During the World War I, she actively supported the American Red Cross through fundraising and volunteer efforts, channeling her organizational talents into wartime relief. Their travels resumed, including visits to Bermuda for relaxation, Panama to inspect the canal her husband had helped oversee, England, where they were received by King George V in a gesture of transatlantic alliance, and Italy for another papal audience that echoed earlier diplomatic encounters. Her passion for politics persisted. In 1923, she joined the Colonial Dames of America, rising to honorary vice president by 1925, and served as an honorary leader of the Girl Scouts of the USA, promoting civic education and empowerment for young women. Following William's death in March 1930, shortly after his retirement as Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, Nellie lived a more subdued existence in Washington, D.C., residing with her longtime housekeeper and engaging in sporadic travels to destinations like Egypt, Mexico, and Europe, where she continued her lifelong pursuit of cultural learning and exploration. She remained engaged with current events, notably opposing the New Deal policies of Franklin D. Roosevelt in the 1930s, critiquing them as excessive government intervention that contradicted her conservative leanings, though she later co-signed a letter with Sarah Roosevelt supporting FDR's war preparedness measures ahead of World War II, demonstrating pragmatic bipartisanship. Nellie passed away on May 22, 1943, at the age of 81 in Washington, D.C., and was interred beside her husband at Arlington National Cemetery, becoming one of only two First Ladies, alongside Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis, to receive this honor, a fitting tribute to their shared legacy in public service.